Hello and welcome to Micro Live. Tonight we'll be looking at a piece of equipment which makes a nonsense of most computer security measures and has serious implications for anyone holding personal data.
And if you still have any faith in the micro after that, we discover how small businesses can use ready-made software to really take off. MicroLive has been examining extraordinary and disturbing evidence that the information displayed on computer screens can be read from a distance using inexpensive electronic equipment. Not only is this easy to do, but we believe that the consequences for anyone holding personal or sensitive data on a computer are far-reaching. It's clear to us that most computer users are unaware of the technology we are about to show, and that some of them will need to take urgent steps to safeguard their data against this form of surveillance.
Well, here is a piece of confidential information. Please enter your password, it says, and I'll just finish it off. There it is. And fortunately for me, you can't read it. Or can you? Any piece of equipment like this contains thousands of electronic switches. As those switches change state, they give out radio signals in all directions, and those signals can be picked up some distance away. This is the kind of equipment you would need. It was assembled for just about £1,000, no more than the cost of an ordinary personal computer. And while I've been talking, Sean Walker, who designed the equipment, has been tuning in. Sean, what have you got here?
Well, basically, Fred, all we've got is a suitable area, which in this case is a CB antenna. We've got a VHF multiband manually tuned receiver, some signal processing, fed to a synchronized visual display unit.
Right, let's put that rather more simply. This is a kind of souped-up version, I think, of a television receiver, is that right?
That's correct, it's just a little bit more wideband.
Right. Greater frequencies then. And this you call a synchronized VDU. Synchronized to what?
Well, the data we're receiving has no synchronizing pulses, so what we do is generate our own and add it with the data.
So you are tuning the timings of this machine into the timings of the IBM micro over there?
That's correct.
Right. OK, well, here's the acid test. What is my password?
Domino.
Domino is correct. Let's see where it is. It's just drifting off the screen a bit, but if we compare that with the original screen, ah yes, there it is, there is my password, Domino. Very good reception. Now you may think that we're simply eavesdropping on this screen. Today we were challenged by the manufacturer of a flat screen monitor who believed that his screens were totally safe. But in fact, the monitor makes very little difference. Even if I disconnect this altogether, well, see what happens. Right, it's in at the moment, I pull the plug, and the information is still there. So, where are those radio signals coming from?
Well, they're being generated internally in the microcomputer by its switching pulses, which generate transients, which generate a carrier wave for the data to go out on.
So it's every part of the micro, virtually?
Every part of it.
Right. One might think that there would be safety in numbers if you've got a whole room full of micros, all the same, that you couldn't zero in on any particular one. Is that right?
Once I got the horizontal frequency, I would then change the directional aerial.
And you could do it?
And I could then zoom in on the terminal I want.
Was this tricky to build?
No, it's quite straightforward, quite basic. Any hobbyist, amateur radio enthusiast could probably put a system together simply in a few evenings.
Right. This I know cost about £1,000, but you've also built a much cheaper version using this television. Now, I don't think this is exactly an ordinary portable television, is it?
No, this is a type of television which is bought by amateur TV enthusiasts to receive continental stations.
Again, it's got a wider frequency
It's got
range.
a wider frequency
but
band.
still available for about
Oh, it's
what?
available about £80, £85.
Right, and what have you done to it?
All I've done is disconnect the synchronising circuit inside, build a external synchronising box from components you can buy in any high street shop.
Yes.
And what
cost of that?
Oh, about £3 or £4, somewhere in there. What you end up with?
Right, now we're tuning in at the moment to an apricot micro over there, and yes, I can certainly see the word apricot as it drifts across, and that is amazing reception. Is it because the apricot is worse than most micros?
Well, I think they should have a broadcast licence.
Right. Thank you very much, Sean. Well, believe it or not, despite the success of that, a live television studio with all its cameras, lights, radio, microphones and so on is probably the worst environment for this kind of demonstration. What happens if you try it outside, in the outside world? We sent Stephen Arkell to find out.
We've transferred the screen reading equipment into this van and moved into the City of London at Finsbury Circus. This van isn't specially adapted. In fact, all we've done is put a Citizens Band aerial on the roof and plugged it into the equipment in the back, which is running off two 12-volt car batteries. can see Treasury convertible stock coming up there. Tender oversubscribed. How difficult was it to get that?
It took approximately 12 minutes.
Yeah.
I need to work on it a bit longer, then we get all the rest of the details there.
The first screen proved to have very little information on it, so we moved into Coleman Street, which contains a number of international banks. It looks as though there might be some interesting data on this.
Certainly looks that way.
Oh, that's very clear. We've got Taiwan, unsurprised by US trade moves. Industry officials say retaliation was the only option. A slight jiggling around here. How easy was it to get a screen like this?
A couple of minutes of locating the frequency, then locating the horizontal frequency, and just moving the vehicle up and down just to get optimum performance.
It was that easy. Yeah. We've got in bold at the top yearly indications. Euro-dollar bonds seem flat to 1/8. That probably means something to somebody. And US Treasuries flat to up to 1/10. February funds open. So I suppose that sort of information could be used to commercial advantage.
If you understand what you're reading.
Yeah. I presume this is something to do with their internal information system, which they like to keep quite private. How easily could this sort of screen be stored?
Well, you could store it on videotape, or what I would prefer is the frame printer, which will print one complete frame of what you're seeing at the moment.
You'd actually get a printout
You
of
get
that
a print
screen.
of that, which would allow you to examine it in more detail later on.
Yeah. Could you actually get the definition a little bit clearer if you used a printer?
Yeah, you could by taking several frames on different frequencies, slightly different frequencies, as I'm demonstrating there, and bits which are missing, or not too clear, you could then obviously combine and read.
We've moved around the corner now, and we seem to be getting some sort of prices or pound signs down the side there. We've got quite a few small shops around here. What sort of equipment do you think this is being seen on?
Looking at the horizontal scan frequency, it's a conventional computer you buy from your ordinary retail outlet, your high street shop. What it's displaying, all I can see is times, prices, and looks like odds.
Yeah, we can see £10.13, for instance, £12.41. The computer screens that we've been reading from a van in the street are housed behind the substantial walls of the City of London. This demonstration shows there really is a major problem with the security of data displayed on a computer terminal. If we were able to do this in the City of London, where secrecy and security have always been paramount, then the problem isn't just confined to Britain, it must be worldwide.
Obviously, we've been very selective in what we chose to show in that film. But during our investigations, we were able to read very personal data. In particular, the details of one couple's mortgage arrears with the Cheltenham and Gloucester Building Society.
The Ministry of Defence has known about this problem for some time and has devised a set of radiation specifications which computers must meet if they're to be considered secure. The code word for these specifications is Tempest. The problem is that Tempest-proofing a computer costs money. In fact, it virtually doubles the price of the machine.
The specification of a Tempest is on the official secret list, so secret that when we asked Oceanics, a leading manufacturer of Tempest equipment, for a demonstration machine, they were refused permission to lend us one.
Here, however, is a simple solution. This black box, which has been designed again by Sean Walker and is about to be produced by DataSafe of Cheltenham. It costs about £100. If I switch it on and off, you'll see what happens to the reception down there. First of all, switch it on and off again and on, and it totally clouds the issue. Sean, how does this work?
Well, it works by emulating and cloaking the data emissions from a terminal.
So, in other words, it transmits the same kind of frequencies, but garbage data.
That's correct.
Now, obviously, it is sending out a lot of radio signals. Is that legal?
Of course it's legal, absolutely.
It doesn't infringe any existing or planned specifications for radio?
None whatsoever.
Sean, thank you very much.
Personal computer manufacturers don't advise their customers that the screens can be snooped on in this way. Stephen Arkell went to Compec, the computer industry showcase, which took place at Olympia this week, to confront the manufacturers with our findings.
The moment we entered Compec, we picked up an extremely strong signal which we could read from halfway across the hall. Eventually, we tracked down its source. Epson had just unveiled a new personal computer, the PCAX, that morning, and sure enough, when I went inside the stand, that was the computer we had been receiving. Ian Phipps of Epson showed me its security device. So you'd say that data was totally secure on this machine?
Yes.
Well, we've got a demonstration just around the corner. Would you like to come out and have a look at it? We're demonstrating data security on PCs and computers.
Yes, fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Just come around here. We can see there the screen of that PCAX. Would you say there was a major problem with security on the screen there?
Well, we are very close to the computer on the stand. I suspect that if this was a mile away or outside a large building, it might not have the same effect.
But we have, in fact, been reading the screen from more than 100 yards away, further on down. Don't you say that's a major problem?
I would say that that screen is very indistinct, actually. I would say you would have very great difficulty in reading that.
If you use a printer, you can, in fact, make that screen come out very clearly indeed, given a bit of time. Wouldn't you say that was a major security problem for corporate and professional users?
Possibly. If there is a very sensitive area, there are products around that will actually shield your computer, or whether you can actually use various other methods that are used by the security services to blank off transmissions from a room.
Do you fit those products to that machine?
Clearly not, no, but there are companies that will do that for corporate customers.
At an extra price?
Of course.
Yeah. Cypher make the monitors for British Telecom's terminals. This was the data as it appeared on their monitor, and it showed up on our equipment like this. Now here we're reading some data from a screen just over here on your stand. Do you think that's a serious problem?
No.
Why not?
Well, the reason being is if people are really worried about radiated interference and people monitoring screens, they will in fact put the terminal in a sealed, shielded building. And that's the way people are tending to go nowadays. If you are worried about security, you'll find that they tend to use normal terminals rather than, say, Tempest-approved terminals, and they will put them in a completely shielded building.
But that costs a lot more money, doesn't it?
No, because you find the buildings are purpose-built. So if you're putting in a new computer and a new system, obviously you're going to have a special purpose-built building anyway, so therefore you might as well build the shielding in initially.
Why aren't terminals like this fitted as standard with a device that would just jam that sort of radiation?
Because it's expensive.
Well,
and because the market has gone away from heavy Tempest-approved terminals. They are basically a very expensive terminal.
We've actually been out and demonstrated this in the street outside banks in the City of London. Don't you think they ought to know about this problem?
I think that's the bank's problem.
I see. So it's not your problem that this
It's
computer
not our problem.
is emitting this sort of radiation?
No. All terminals do the same.
Although some personal computer manufacturers seem to be aware of the problem, they don't seem to be too worried about it. It is astounding that their attitude is so casual. After all, the problem is fundamental to the security of computer data.
At first glance, what we've done tonight looks quite similar to hacking. Alistair Kelman is a computer barrister. Alistair, is this a form of hacking?
No. Hacking involves a person deceiving a computer into believing he's a legitimate user. All that you've been doing is sitting in the street listening to passing conversations. The conversations just happen to be electronic.
It's rather like overhearing something through an open window.
Yes, and the solution is to close the window.
Right. Let's get this absolutely clear. Is it illegal to build or own or use equipment of this nature?
No, provided it's not used to listen into government departments where you could fall foul of the Official Secrets Act.
Otherwise, it's no more than a radio receiver.
That's correct.
Does the Data Protection Act apply in this case?
Only if personal data is involved. So if you're looking at someone's financial records, and those involve people rather than companies, then yes, the Data Protection Act could be involved.
Right, so who would the onus be on to protect the interests of the individual?
It would be on the person who owns the computer and is processing the personal data.
Right, and the man in the street, is it up to that individual to sue the company if things go wrong? Is that the
Yes, he
situation?
would be entitled to damages if he has suffered damage through the emanation of personal data.
But wait a minute, that means that something would have had to have gone seriously wrong first. He's only entitled to compensation after the event.
That's right.
So the law as it stands does not protect the individual at all until damages have taken place.
That was what Parliament said in the Data Protection Act.
Right. What do you think should be done now then?
Three things. First, what you have done tonight, and that is there has to be a greater public awareness of the problem. Secondly, major British companies could quite easily come together and say, our procurement policy, our buying policy from the middle of next year is going to be that we're only going to buy computers which contain security. And that would mean that the problem would be forced, the manufacturers would be forced to deal with the problem. Thirdly, the government could match the private sector's commitment by doing the same thing. It could say all government computers that are bought are only going to they're only going to buy computers that contain security.
Do you think that's likely to happen?
Well, it all depends upon the public pressure that organisations such as the National Council for Civil Liberties, members of political parties, need to put pressure upon their members of Parliament to ensure that this threat to personal liberty is properly dealt with.
Supposing this is not tightened up, what abuses do you foresee?
Well, after the Big Bang, there's a lot of concern about what's called insider trading in the city, where people make use of confidential information which they shouldn't do for private gain. Now, this could be, if you like, outsider trading, in that other people could get hold of that confidential information, which could be very damaging to the Big Bang and to British companies generally.
Yes, what might threaten the individual?
Well, detectives could sit outside people's homes and instead of bothering to go for a telephone tap and search warrants, could listen in to the emanations of personal computers.
Totally legally, of course.
Of course.
What are the implications for industrial espionage?
Well, industrial espionage is growing with greater worldwide competition, and so, of course, this piece of kit that you demonstrated may be a standard piece of surveillance equipment very soon.
I understand, I'll have to stop you there, but thank you very much indeed. So, what's to be done? The Ministry of Defence has no intention of becoming involved in this debate. The manufacturers are obviously playing the issue down. The banks, the building societies, the insurance companies, those organisations which handle our confidential information are apparently not going to spend millions if they can in any way avoid it. It seems clear that unless we, the general public, demand that our personal data is properly protected, nothing is going to happen.
Within 15 years of the cash register being introduced, just about every company had one. The same is happening with small business micros. But with so many systems around, choosing the right one isn't plain sailing. Running an airline has never been the most reliable way of making money, even with modern equipment. Yet a small company in Coventry is successful using aircraft that first flew during the Second World War. Air Atlantique's fleet of Dakotas belong to another era. They regularly appear at air shows, but it isn't nostalgia that keeps these planes flying. In a highly competitive business, they're simply the most suitable aircraft for the job. Air Atlantique has responded to a new type of trade. As manufacturing industries have cut their stocks, they cope with occasional unplanned shortages by moving supplies or equipment from one factory to another at very short notice. Air Atlantique has planes waiting on the ground, ready to leave for anywhere in Europe at less than an hour's notice. Margins are small, and with a staff of only 30, administration has to be kept to a minimum. In many ways, a small airline is like any small business, with invoices, bills and accounts. And trying to find the right computer system to handle them is an all too familiar problem.
We did not really know what we were looking for. We just felt that it would be a good idea to get a computer to try and achieve what we were trying to achieve. And it's fair to say that not really knowing what we were doing, we got the wrong equipment to begin with. We also were not able to convey to the software manufacturers precisely what we were after, so they didn't produce really what we were after, and we had to go back and get some more software. And it's taken some time to get the right combination of software and hardware.
Air Atlantique doesn't have a seat reservation system, but running a small airline does have its own particular problems. A host of regulations and safety requirements have to be met, and planning a flight involves everything from calculating the pilot's flying hours to knowing where to store the cargo. Many large airlines use computers for this sort of work, but specially written software would have been both expensive and unproven. The company chose instead to buy a fairly straightforward system that could easily handle their basic accounts.
To choose a system, we basically went through the local yellow pages and looked up all the dealers that had the software that we wanted to buy. So we went to those dealers, and the dealers which gave us the best response, sent us the letters and phoned us, etc. We went back to them and actually had an interview with them and looked at their software on their machines. And then we chose between those two, basically, by looking at the dealer and the kind of backup he would give us after we'd bought the package, and the machine that we would be able to use the package on, because we wanted to buy both the machine and the package from the same dealer. The tandem machine was very good value for the money. It gave us a hard disk, which meant that we could use it in the future as well as now. We wouldn't be restricted by the amount of space we had. And the Sage package was everything we wanted the accounting to do, but we could also upgrade fairly easily to more advanced packages without too many problems.
Without a doubt, the most important attribute of having a computer is the production of monthly management accounts. Using a computer for accounting can give you figures within a few days of the end of each month. And a small company needs to know where it is. It needs to know whether it's making a profit or a loss, whether it's selling at the right price. And if you use human beings on this, you can still get the information within a few days, but you'll need quite a few human beings, and they'll need to be experts, really, at the job.
Now that a computer is successfully handling the accounts, the company is starting to use computers in other ways. Air Atlantique does much of its own maintenance, and like all airlines, is required by law to keep its operational procedures up to date. Rewriting the necessary manuals used to be very time-consuming, but now a £400 work processor can do the work very easily. In general, this company's introduction of computers has been rightly cautious, buying only what they need at any time and being very careful not to become over-dependent.
My advice to any small business getting a computer is to expect a couple of years to pass before you really get the best out of the computer. But once you are beginning to get the best out of it in maybe one particular facet, perhaps the accounts, then to consider expanding the use of the computer into other areas, but not to run before you can walk.
35, 40 inches.
Air Atlantique's Dakotas were flying long before the first commercial computers were built. The company hopes that their micros will help keep the planes in the air for many years to come. There are 4 popular uses for micros in a small business. There's sorting out your finances with an accounting package, or word processing. Air Atlantique did both of these. Then you may want to plan ahead using a spreadsheet, or put your filing onto a database. Well, any of these systems, properly applied, could be good for business. But where do you go for advice? Well, you could try starting with magazines like these. There are a number of them which specialize in giving advice for first-time business users. But one of the best guides is this one here. And the first article, called Prepare Yourself, was written by Kathy Lang. Kathy, nowadays you could buy quite a good personal business micro for about £400. But that's really not all you're risking, is it?
It certainly isn't. We saw on the film how Air Atlantique had all their accounts on their computer, and if that didn't work properly, then their business could go bust as a result.
So there is a risk in actually implementing a total system. What do you have to do before you actually go out and buy a computer?
Well, the first thing to do is to decide what you really want to use it for, and then to try to get some feel for what amount of information we're talking about, to get some figures. What are the critical times of year when the system's going to be most busy? How quickly do you need the results? To write that down, and then when you've written it down, you've got a checklist that you can use to help you choose a system and also to give you some success criteria so you know whether you've achieved what you set out to achieve.
At this point in time, you're not really worrying about the type of computer or even the power of the computer.
No. First of all, decide what you want to do, and then think about the software to do it with. Equipment comes last.
Right, so you've written down what you want to do, you've got some good idea of how much it's going to contribute to your business, you've then got to go and find a dealer or somebody to buy the machine from and the system. How do you go about doing that?
If you're computerising for the first time, then it's very likely that you'll need some help and support at the beginning, so it's sensible to try and buy the machine from somebody local. So you can look in the Yellow Pages.
Like Atlantique did.
Exactly.
Pretty unusual.
Yes, not many people do that. But nevertheless, it's certainly one good way. You can ask other users, people who've already got computers, where they bought their system from and what they think of the supplier. You can talk to people at your local college or polytechnic, because they're in contact with a lot of other users who already bought computers, and they all have views on the local dealers.
Because there are very cheap micros around today that you can just buy from a high street store, and you're not going to get much advice from them, are you?
Absolutely not. If you pay washing machine prices, the chances are you'll get no more support than you would for a washing machine. But you don't just have to expect support from the people that you bought the machine from in the first place.
So you've selected a dealer, let us say. What do you expect from your dealer? What questions would you ask him?
Well, I think the first thing to ask him to find out is whether he's ever installed systems of the sort that you're thinking of installing. Find out what his experience is. And then you should ask him if you can talk to one or two people who've already bought systems from him, so you can see what their experience was.
Preferably in the same sort of business that you're actually in.
That's right, exactly. Then you should find out what sort of training he'll offer and whether he'll give a warranty. And you should get him to write his answers down if you're spending any sort of sizable sum of money. And the money side is important. If you are spending a sizable sum of money, try to keep some of it back so that you're sure the system works. Don't pay it all over right at the beginning.
And how would you detect a bad deal? A quick one.
Well, a scruffy outfit is usually a very bad sign.
And the bottom line, what would you recommend, your final piece of advice?
I think if people apply the same scepticism that they would to buying a second-hand car, they won't go far wrong.
Thank you very much, Kathy. So to sum up, first analyse your business needs and write them down. Then find a good dealer. But remember, you know your business far better than they do. Above all, keep it simple and don't expect too much from your first application. And finally, if you want a copy of Kathy's guide, send for it.
And the address will be at the end of the programme. Next week, we'll be taking another look at small business software, but until then, when we're back at our old time of 7:30, good night.